Hello viewer, and welcome to another episode of Eric the Car Guy. Behind me I have a 2004 Acura TL. It has a 3.2 liter engine and a 6-speed manual transmission. And it is in here for a timing belt and quote-unquote major service. And I'm also going to be changing the spark plugs. And one of the things that I'm going to do during the process of this service is adjust the valves. Now, I've done other valve adjustment videos on the 4 cylinders on the B series and the F series Honda engines. This is the first one I'm putting out on the J series. I'll say that as far as the interval for adjustment goes, the manual states that it's pretty much at your discretion. When they get noisy or something like that is when you do it. This is not going to cure a performance problem. It's very, very unlikely it's going to cure a performance problem. Now, it's like that extra little edge to give you like maybe a smoother idle and smoother engine operation, but it will not cure something. So don't go in here thinking that you're going to go in and adjust your valves and something's going to be cured. I also need to say that if you're not experienced in adjusting valves, you might want to practice on something easier first. And I say something easier because with a V6 like this, in order to adjust the valves, you've got to get the front and rear valve covers off, you've got to get the intake manifold off, and that's a chore. So in other words, if you don't get it right and you get done with this valve adjustment and you got a rough idle because maybe you got a few of them too tight, that's a whole lot of work to go back and do. Also, these valves need to be adjusted with the engine cold. Some valve adjustments need to be adjusted with the engine hot. These are not. So the engine needs to be stone cold. So by the time you find out that you messed up and need to do it over, you got a lot of stuff to take apart to get back there. Now this does make it so that it's easier, so that there's some cool down time before you get back there, but the idea is you want to get this right the first time. So the other rule that I'm going to throw it at you is it's better to hear them than smell them, as we say. Meaning that it's better to go on the loose side of the adjustment than go on the tight side of the adjustment. Just a little piece of advice. But I'm going to walk you through the steps of adjusting the valves on this here 2004 TL J series engine. This also works for any of the other J series engines that are out there for the most part. I can't really think of anything else to talk about here other than why don't I go over to the car and start taking it apart so we can see what we're doing. Meet you over there. First order of business is going to be to remove some plastic covers. I like to remove all of these. These just pull up. Start with this one because this one's hooked into this one. Then there's this one in the back, which it's odd to see this little piece here. Somebody put this in later, but normally all you have to do is pull back on this tab. And this one here, you can lift up and that comes out. So this is not stock. Somebody stuck that there. And there's supposed to be another one of those tabs here that's missing. Pull up and all these can come out on the bench. These are the little tabs that I'm talking about. You should be able to just push back on and pull up. And then these are just slid in there behind the strut bar. To remove the engine cover, there are these 3 flat sort of locks on the front. Just sort of turn them so they're at 12 and 6 o'clock. And you'll be able to loosen this from the front of the engine, and then the back is just in rubber grommets, so you can just pull up on it. See the rubber grommets here, and these little pegs fit down in there. We're also going to be taking the intake off, so I'm also going to take this battery cover off, and all this does is just sort of pull out. It's once again just held in by these tabs that are hooked into rubber grommets down here. Now that we've got the engine compartment bling removed, I'm going to take off the air filter assembly. And these are just, you can either use a Phillips head screw or a screwdriver, or I have an 8mm here. I suggest using the 8mm because a lot of times those Phillips head screws can get rusted into place and they don't want to come out so good. I'm also going to disconnect the MAF sensor because I'm pretty much going to be removing this snorkel here. There's just 4 of these 8mm screws around the outside of this air box. And this also works if you're replacing the air filter assembly. I think everybody knows how Eric the Car Guy feels about these battery terminals, and once again, it's all crusted up. Sometimes you can get away without like undoing this clamp, but sometimes you can't. But you're gonna have to do that in order to remove this. Now down underneath this air cleaner assembly, you'll see this harness that comes off this ugly battery cable and clips underneath the air box right here. And it does it in two places that I can't quite show you. Maybe I can. It does it in two places, here and here. And I take a pair of pliers and pinch the little connections under here and they'll come up. So if you're wondering what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. I have this nifty set of angled pliers that I'm gonna use to do this with, but I'm just gonna sneak under here and squeeze the ends of that clip together. Hopefully squeeze the ends of that clip together and then pull up. You can see how I was able to pull it out of there. Try the same thing over here. There, you can non-violently remove these. And you're just pinching that together to try and get it out. That's all you gotta do. Now I can safely remove upper part of the air box. Air filter actually doesn't look too bad at all. It's fairly new. Aftermarket, but new. This is going to get a little tricky because this car is drive-by-wire, meaning there's no cable that runs between here and the gas pedal. They use this electronic motor assembly to basically open and close the throttle. Do not push this throttle open or closed with it connected. Also, make sure that the key is not on when you do this. Make sure the key is in the off position. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this assembly. And I just push down on the tab and just unplug it, as you can see. I've also already unplugged the MAF sensor, and this is the intake air temperature sensor that I'm just going to unplug. And that pretty much leaves it open as far as the throttle body. Now, what I'm going to do is take off these 4 fasteners around the outside, and I'm going to remove the throttle body from the intake manifold. In doing so, you may damage this gasket. I really hope you don't damage this gasket because, you know, that would be a pain. But if you're careful, you should be able to reuse this gasket. I've done it several times without incident. But you need to be mindful of it. These are 12mm fasteners. There's only 4 of them. There's 2 bolts on the bottom and then 2 nuts on the top. 1, 2, now a couple of love taps with a hammer. I mean love taps. We'll knock this loose. That's it. And to do this, I'm just going to remove the upper hose. And I'll remove the 2 fasteners for the solenoid. These are 10mm. I don't see any need of disconnecting this connection because I just want the intake manifold, so I'm just going to let that fall out of the way. Okay, on the back of the intake towards the firewall or bulkhead, there is the brake line or the vacuum line that goes to the brake booster. Pull that up on the way. And there's this other vacuum line here. Connects to that vacuum switch. It's held on by this 10mm. Once again, I'm not going to disconnect any electrical connections here because that way I know where those connections go. I can just basically pull this out of the way, which is all I really needed to do for now. But don't forget it was there because it does go back quite a ways. I'm going to go after this power steering line now. So I'm going to take these two 10s off here, but also it's going to be kind of hard to show you and do at the same time. But in fact, it's even hard here. Okay, there's this bracket. This is the power steering line here. And then down below this bracket, there's this 10mm bolt that connects to the valve cover. I'm going to be removing that. So if you're wondering where I'm at, it's right back there. This is all 10mm stuff, by the way. Now that the hose is loose, there's going to be a little bit of loss here, but I want to get it up out of the way. So I'm just going to pull it out of the power steering pump. And then I'm going to fish it up under this strut brace. I'm actually going to put a rag on it and stick it right up under the hood there. Keep the rag under it too, because it might drip on the windshield and the windshield wipers. You don't want that to happen, and you don't want it to scratch the finish either. Now we just have a couple more things to disconnect, and we can remove the intake manifold. And that is, this is the motor that actuates the dual stage intake. There's like, you'll see inside, there's like a butterfly inside there that opens and closes, and this motor is what actuates that. Then there's the PCV line. Sweet. Now we have to get the inner plate off, or what I call the ant farm, and this is basically what houses the EGR, but it also houses the fasteners that hold the intake to the upper intake to the lower intake. So you need to remove this cover in order to get to that. These are all 10mm. Once you've got the fasteners removed, you can just take the cover off. These used to look like an ant farm, but this is basically the EGR passages. All right, now I can tell someone's been in here because look, they didn't do a very good job of putting that cover back on, and as a result, they haven't got this gasket in here properly. It's not in there quite right, but I'm actually gonna wait to fix that until I put it back together. This gasket here is reusable, but as far as EGR, these are the passages. Now these later model 3.2s really didn't have so much of a problem with EGR flow, mainly because they had that big open plenum style instead of what I called the ant farm. But the EGR comes back in here, flows to each of these, flows into the top of that assembly and into each of these. Now remember when I was telling you there was a flap that opens up? Well, that's connected to this motor. And it's a two-stage intake, so it like has narrow runners, like when you're taking off from a dead stop, but when you go wide open throttle, it'll open this area up here and allow even more air to get into this area here, which makes it awesome. But the next step is to remove these fasteners that hold it to the lower intake. And I don't believe you have to remove these 10s. Actually, it's been a little bit of time since I've done this, but I do know that you remove all these 12mm. That one, those there, that pair, and then these. And then you should be able to remove this upper intake manifold. Now I'm not removing the fasteners that are in the intake itself. I'm just gonna remove it, just lift it up straight up off of there, and all the fasteners will stay in place. It'll save me the trouble of dropping them back down in there and losing them. It's just that simple. You can clearly see at this point that you needed to remove that intake manifold in order to access these fasteners for the valve cover. Plus, you can see you've got a lot more room to work with in here. So now it's a matter of removing these valve covers. So let me give you a close-up of what's going on in the back here. Some of you might be saying, hey, why don't you remove this strut bar? Well, if you look closely, the strut bar is kind of connected to fuse box and a bunch of other stuff, and I don't like to disconnect things that I don't have to disconnect, so I'm just gonna leave that in place because I feel that this is plenty of room to work in, at least for me. I've worked in worse. This phase of the operation involves two things. All right, one of those things is you'll see down here that there is a fastener that holds this harness down, and then these coil packs. There's 3 coil packs held down by these. I'm just going to disconnect those, and I'm also going to unfasten the harness from there and there. So I'm going to disconnect the connectors to the coil packs. That sort of frees that up. And here's the other one. Now my harness is unshackled from the valve cover and I've got some leeway with it. It's not going to come out completely. It's just not going to happen. So just pretty much get it as loose as you can so that you can get in when you need to get in, where you're getting in, and be happy with that. Let me give myself a little more movement. This is just slid into this groove in this upper timing cover here. So that gives me a little bit more. I mean, nothing to really write home about, but like I said, you're not going to get it all. It's just not possible. Okay, I lied. Then over on this side over here, there's a little clip on this harness, and there's a little plastic tab. If you push it up like that, you can pull this connection away. There we go. Now we get just a little bit more wiggle room with that last connection undone down there. While I'm in the neighborhood, I'm just going to take off the PCV vent tube. Now I'm going to remove these coil packs. There's 3 of them, and this is a number 6 Allen right here for these. You don't want to strip that out. All right, now you just pull the coil packs up out of their holes. Set them aside. And while you got them out, you might as well inspect them for like any oil contamination or anything like that. That could indicate like a valve cover or something like that's leaking. Or sometimes you may find some sort of marks on the outside of them, like maybe one of these might be arcing or having a problem. These are all good. As long as I'm back here, I'm just going to remove the spark plugs now. Oops, sorry. Sort of have to slip that down in there just right. Using a 6-inch extension on my spark plug socket. This is just a telescopic magnet that I'm going to go down into the bore and grab the spark plugs with. Glad to see they're of the correct type. These are expensive, but well worth the price because you don't have to change them but every 100,000 miles or so. Those of you that are worried about this brown stuff here, don't worry about it. It's actually supposed to be there. It's called the Corona. We'll talk about that in some other video. Whoops. I think it's high time we got some of these valve cover fasteners off. You got one there in the back. Yeah, and then it's just 1, 2, 3. So that, I believe there's 5 total. Now that you've got it all loose from everything, you should be able to just pull up on it lightly. Ta-da! Alright, now it's a little late for me to turn on the key and tell you how many miles this has on it. Maybe I could do that at the end of the video, but I believe it's a little over 100,000. But this guy changes his oil on a regular basis, and you can see the difference. There's virtually no buildup, nothing. So this just goes to show you, a well-maintained vehicle, you can go so far. But this is our prize here. This is what we're looking at, these adjusters. These are the intake side, and on the back, down in the back, is the exhaust. And the fun is about to begin, but I'm going to get the other front cover off first before we actually go and start our adjustments. But you can barely see back here the adjusters for the exhaust valves in the back down there. These are the spark plug tubes, and this is the whole VTEC thing. I got a video on that that I could post a link in the description to. Let's get that front cover off. But I mean, this thing looks flippin' beautiful down inside. Front cover is not nearly as difficult as the rear, but the first thing I'll do is I'll take the dipstick out. You break this little plastic thing off, you'll hate life. So I just get rid of that possibility right away and set it out there on the bench. Same as before, we've got a harness that we can get up out of the way, actually rather easily, just by taking these 2 fasteners here off. Down here by the EGR, we have another one of those retainers for the harness that I'm just going to take my pliers, just like I did on the air cleaner assembly, and just go in and sort of compress it, pull it through. And just like before, you just compress those tabs and pull back, and it'll come right out. That helps a little, not a lot, if I'm honest. I'm also going to disconnect the EGR. Might as well do the coil packs. Now, for this front one, it's really tight. You might want to get like a smaller, like instead of one with it on a socket, you might want to get one of those kind with an angle to get down in here. Or you can just remove this overflow up out of the way. It'll give you access. Once again, we're going to inspect things. A little bit of rust on that one. We are going to have to remove this overflow to get this coil pack out. And see, it backs right up against it. Plus it'll be easier to get to the spark plug. This is not difficult. There's a 10mm fastener right here underneath this shield. Remember, yeah, there's nothing else holding this in. This is just this 110, and then you can lift the assembly out. Now that it's loose, you can just take that bad boy right up out of there and set it aside. Now I can remove my coil pack so much easier. It's getting a little bit of rust on there. It's not critical, it's just something to note. Plugs look pretty normal, but what I'd expect in this car, it's actually looking really good. I don't really see any signs of burning oil, nothing. I mean, it's in great health. Same deal with the front cover as there is on the back. There's 5 10mm fasteners that hold it on. And again, once it's all loose, it's just a matter of pulling it up. And even more clearly, you can see how nice this engine is inside. I mean, it really is in superb condition. And it doesn't look like it's got 10 miles on it, let alone 100 and something.